everybody. Welcome to another edition of Krown Countdown U. Let's get right to it and introduce our panelists, Gord Randall in Vancouver and Justin Dunk in Toronto. But first, let's go to the highlights. And Andrew, last week on this show, we talked about just how important it would be for the Rouge et Or in Montreal. And the two teams proved what might serve as affirmation that the red and blue rivalry is the best in the nation.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Jimmy. Win this series and you're punching your ticket to a national championship game. The last time one of these two teams wasn't in the Vanier Cup, 2009. We begin in the first queue. The Red Machine strike first. Hugo Richard punches this one in from 2 yards out, and it's 7-blank Laval. In the second queue, the Bleu et Blanc come to life. Montreal down 6. That was until Louis Mathieu Normandin, or LMN from here on out, takes this Sam Caron pass to the house. That put Montreal in front by 1. Right before the poutine break, this major from Caron capped an 18-point quarter for MTL to the third. Laval cuts that deficit to just 1 point as Jonathan Breton Robert goes house with this 11-yard scamper. Under 2 minutes to go, Laval puts this puppy away. Dom Levesque's 24-yard field goal put the red and gold ahead by 3, and that would be the final. They take it by 12. Over to Sherbrooke, Stingers on the road, but that didn't seem to faze them early on. Concordia put up 17 first half points. This Sam Nadon major from 37 yards out put the visitors up by 14. Second half, and the Ver et Or flipped this game on its head. The green and gold scored 19 in the third and followed up with another 14 in the fourth, shutting Concordia out in the process. Sherbrooke gets a much-needed W, keeping its playoff hopes alive. So could McGill keep themselves in the playoff race? Well, let's find out. Yes, they did. Freddie Paquette Perreault was a monster in this one. The Redmond pivot tossed for 465 yards, 3 majors on the day. McGill stomps Bishops, maintaining their footing for that final playoff berth in the queue. Let's head over to Atlantic Canada now. Mounties on the road in Wolfville. We start in the third, MTA down by 5 until Jacob Lux hits Dakota Brush for the 13-yard major. Mounties up by 2. Under a minute to go, MTA clinging to that 2-point lead. Axeman kicker Brandon Jennings with the game on his foot from 34 yards out. It gets blocked. The third-string quarterback Graham Kelly blocks it with his arm. Might have saved the season for the Mounties. Holy cow, what a finish. Woo! Hard to contain myself after that one. Let's head over to Halifax now and wrap up this AUS puppy. The Salty Dogs coming off a big win over MTA last week. However, this one, not so good. The reigning conference champs flex their muscles, taming the Huskies by 39. Tavon Cook, big game, 410 yards, 3 majors, another walk in the park for him. How about this guy, though? Keon Julian Grant had himself a day. 5 catches for, you ready for this? 230 yards, 2 majors. I bet we'll be hearing more about him later on in the show. Ladies and gentlemen, that's called foreshadowing right there. Okay, over to Ontario, Purple Ponies in the nation's capital, and this wasn't a contest. Western proving each and every week that they are the class of the OUA. The Mustangs put up over 700 yards on offense, including 338 on the ground, led by Alex Taylor, who put up 160 of those yards. Western improves to 6-1 with a 51-point shellacking of the Gigi. Back on the road to face the Lions, and it was the Marauders who ruled the jungle in this one. Mac scored in double figures in 3 quarters en route to an easy W. Of note, McMaster kicker Adam Priokainen needs just 2 field goals in his final game this weekend versus Western to tie the CIS single-season record of 26. Let's head to the 6 now. Varsity Blues capped off their season with an easy win over Waterloo. Toronto getting a massive game from Raoul Madan. The 5th-year senior nabbed 9 passes for 186 yards, including this one score from 75 yards out. Varsity Blues finished 2-6 on the season with a 31-point win over the not-so-Warriors. Windsor in Kingston to face the Gales. This was a game of utmost importance for both teams. Unfortunately, only one team stepped up, and that was Queens, led by running back Jonah Pataki, who scored 3 tutties while rushing for 139 yards, leading the Gales to a 50-point blowout. With the win, the Gales host Ottawa next week, where a win would guarantee them a playoff berth. That win would get Queens in because Guelph was unable to get a win on the road versus Laurier. The Griffins were down 17-6 at the recess to the Jayhawks, but they managed to claw themselves back into the game in the second half, but narrowly lose by 2. The reigning Yates Cup champs now need a win next week over York and a Queens loss to Ottawa to slip into the final seed in the OUA playoffs. Oh, how the mighty have fallen. Go West, life is peaceful there. Go West. Oh, sorry, having a Pet Shop Boys moment there. Over to the Chuck we go. G-Bears hosting the Rams. This looked to be all Regina early on. The Rams put up 12 points on the board in the first half, but a field goal from Alberta in the dying seconds of the half cut the lead to just 6. Third Q, the Rams opened up the half with a 3-banger, but this 14-yard major pulled the G-Bears within 2. Alberta upsets the number 4 team in the nation with a 1-point win. To Saskatoon now, the annual blackout game at Griffith. This was all Prairie Dogs. UBC's roller coaster ride of a season. Well, it continued. Kyle Siemens and Mitch Hillis made easy work of the reigning national champs. Siemens tossed for close to 350 yards, 3 scores, while Hillis caught 10 balls for 175 yards, 2 majors. The fireworks were going, all in the favor of the Huskies as they cruised to a 30-point, much-needed win. To Cowtown we go to put this reel to bed, just like the Dinos did to the Herd. Oh, did I just ruin the surprise? Come on, you knew this was coming. The Prehistorics put up over 600 yards of offense on their way to a 57-point win. However, of note, Calgary lost starting pivot Jimmy Underdahl to injury in the third quarter of this one. No status yet on the extent of the injury. Let's just say, Jimmy, well, he didn't like it.
Extra, extra, read all about it.
Well, we do not like publishing this headline. We are in the final week or 2 of the season, and the leaders are familiar and predictable. Calgary in the West, Montreal and Laval doing the red-blue dance in Quebec, an Atlantic team at the top of their cycle, and Western, who are scorching the Ontario earth. Justin, we had hope after an early falter, but is there anyone else except the Purple Ponies in the OUA?
Western certainly looks like the favorite in the OUA, Jim, but there are some teams that I believe can compete with the Mustangs and maybe pull off an upset in the playoffs. Let's start with earlier in the season. Their only loss came to the Carleton Ravens, who have a big defensive front and were able to slow that running game just enough to get a 7-point victory. This week they have a big-time matchup with the McMaster Marauders to get that number 1 overall seed. There's some seniors on that Marauder defense like Mike Kashik that could potentially try and stop this loaded Western offense. And the other team that I think might have a chance is Laurier, who played them pretty tight early in the schedule. So those are 3 teams that I think could give the Purple Ponies a run for their money.
And for my 2 cents on this issue, I think it's a little bit overblown when we're rolling our eyes at Western rolling over this conference, because if you look at the last 5 Yates Cup championships, Western's only won 1 of them. So this is not like this is a team that is a perennial champion in this conference, even though they're a perennial contender, and there's nothing wrong with that. For those of you who still like to talk about the OUA having parity, well, Western doesn't just roll over this conference every year.
Well, Calgary are back to their old selves, led by the best D in the conference by far. However, to paraphrase Sir Mix-a-Lot, Gord, there are some big butts here, and I cannot lie. It's at quarterback with Jimmy Underdahl being out for the rest of the year with that knee injury, and Adam Sinagra jumps in and he takes the helm.
Well, Jim, I'll talk about that quarterback situation in a second, but to paraphrase Jay-Z, one of the best rappers from my generation, the Calgary Dinos have 99 problems, but Austin Hartley ain't one. He came back from injury, had a massive game against the Bisons last weekend in that romp. That was a real statement victory for them. As for the quarterback situation, we have tossed the idea out here that with the system they run on offense, they're under a very good offensive coordinator in Ryan Shane, that there is a level of quarterback proofness to the offensive system. And Sinagra was a big-time recruit coming out of the Montreal area. He was highly sought after. This is a guy that's got loads of talent. If Shane puts him in a situation where he can make high percentage throws and get a comfort zone going, this offense can roll just as efficiently as they were beforehand, I think.
With former #1 Regina losing at winless Alberta, does that scream parity or mediocrity in the Canada West, Justin?
To me, it might speak to how hard it is to win on the road in Canada West, whether you're going out of your province or just out of town. You have a winless Alberta team knocking off Regina, who is ranked 4th in the country, absolutely rolling under quarterback Noah Picton, and he goes in there and doesn't even throw a touchdown. So it doesn't scream mediocrity to me. To me, it's more parity and about how tough it is to get a road victory in Can West.
Well, guys, I've said for years that I think the Canada West is the hardest conference to play in and week out in this country. There are no off weeks in that conference. And even a trip to Edmonton when Alberta's struggling used to be a little bit harder when they were playing on a field hockey surface and it was basically a track. But still, you get some good fans that come out to those games. And what surprised me about this result is that Alberta has the offense that I thought would be able to compete in some shootouts, but it was the defense that showed up, and Noah Picton we thought was going to torch those guys who have been torched for most of the year and frankly for most of the past decade. And the final scores being in the teens just floored me. Once these guys get to the national level, though, they're beating up on each other so much that I wonder if the results at the national level are going to indicate mediocrity when that may not really be the case with the Canada West. It's just going to be a matter of attrition.
Well, sticking with Canada West, yeah, they lost some players to graduation for sure. Buckley, Timmis, McEwen, Onyemata, Loeffler, Terrell Davis. That's going to happen. But losing guys before they graduate is worrisome. Jamel Lyles and Kent Hicks from Manitoba, Rashawn Simonize from Calgary, Jimmy Ralph from Alberta. It's proven that the depth isn't there, and we are on the brink of a bad cycle of player supply, Gord. Youth football, kids are checking into flag programs, but they aren't necessarily moving into tackle programs. I think we're finally seeing the manifestation of that at the university level. You're a high school coach. What do you think?
To be honest with you, Jim, I completely disagree with you on that point. I think that the junior league out in the West, both the leagues, the Prairie Conference and the BC Conference, are the strongest in the country. I think that high school situation, Calgary is one of the most fertile recruiting grounds in the country. Winnipeg punches way above its weight there. Vancouver also is really strong for that. And I think that the flag thing that you point out, all it does is it protects these kids from hitting earlier. And frankly, based on what I've seen coming into the high school ranks, those kids that are playing contact football aren't learning anything that will transfer to a higher level anyway, because the coaching quality is just not good enough at those lower levels. So I don't think that that's a factor either. I just think that this is a conference that, like I said in my previous point, it's not a matter of being too thin, it's almost a matter of being too thick, in that it's so deep and there's so much competition in this conference that I think that they just wear each other down too much. But I really do strongly disagree with you. The high school, I can speak firsthand, the level of ball being played at high school here in this area, in the Vancouver area, is as high as it's ever been.
Justin, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'll sort of agree with you, Jim, because I believe the talent level is higher, but I'm with you in terms of the numbers being down in the volume, and that's bared out in recent CFL drafts. And if you look at this class coming up in 2017 in particular, it's already said to be not quite as deep of a class. So I think the talent level is definitely improving across the country, and those high-end talents like David Onyemata are up there and can play with anyone on the football field in the world, but the depth is something that might hurt in the years to come.
And one of the other problems is that here in Vancouver, your third biggest market in the country, at the high school level, they play American rules ball. And what's happening is we're seeing more and more the elite athletes from British Columbia are all going down to the NC2A. I mean, you see guys like Jonathan Congo, who goes down to Tennessee, starts in year one. Granted, he played at a JUCO for a year, but that's what we're seeing year after year in this province. You've got another guy coming out this year, Jeremy Cankalongo, who's probably going to go south of the border as well. So what you get is you're not seeing a lot of the top-tier talent stick around in the Canada West, particularly from the province of British Columbia, just purely because of that American rules thing.
Well, the CFL, the CIS, Football Canada, CJFL, and the provincial organizations need to show some leadership and cooperation on this issue. It's central. There's some leaders out there that are better than others in that regard. Now it's time to go off to Weekend Warriors. Weekend warrior numero uno is Saskatchewan's Mitch Hillis, who is back in the lineup after what was believed to be a rib injury. The inside receiver closed out the blowout of the UBC Thunderbirds with 2 TD receptions, had 10 on a day, proving that in a conference lacking in competitive depth, one skilled player can make a huge difference, Gord.
Well, my first weekend warrior is Matthew Betts, proving that in a conference with depth at the top, that a non-skilled player can make a huge impact. In a game that finished with scores in the low teens, as always seems to be the case between Montreal and Laval, Matthew Betts was the guy that stood out for that Laval defensive line. 3 sacks on the afternoon for a guy that was getting preseason President's Trophy hype. He stepped up big time in this game, and if he can be that disruptive throughout the month of November for the Laval Rouge, or no one's going to stop them on the way to a Dunsmore Cup.
My number one weekend warrior, fellas, Jack McEwen, defensive lineman, Calgary. That name might be familiar to Dinos fans because he's the brother of all-Canadian offensive lineman and Dinos product, Sean McEwen, who was drafted 3rd overall by the Argos in 2015. He had a huge day for the Dinos. 5.5 tackles, 2.5 tackles for loss, 2.5 sacks, and 1 forced fumble too, part of a Calgary defense that held Manitoba to 200 yards and just 6 points.
My second weekend warrior is Alex Taylor, the talented running back of the Western Mustangs, who has a shot at a 1,000-yard season after his 160-yard 3 TD effort over Ottawa. With all the talk of Merchant versus Bone, it is Mr. Taylor who has the consistency.
Let's go out to the East Coast where I was for Acadia Mount Allison, but we'll go to Antigonish and St. Francis Xavier receiver Keon Julian Grant had a big day, 230 receiving yards on just 5 catches, the second highest single game total in program history. He had 2 touchdowns, 80 and 65 yards, leads the AUS with 611 yards receiving. Big day for KJG.
Yeah, that was a huge statement victory for the X-Men. I want to touch on that really quickly. I'm going to go to one of my alma maters. We're going to Queens back in Ontario, and Jonah Pataki, one of the guys who we thought was going to be one of the elite workhorse running backs in the OUA this year, hasn't gotten a lot done for chunks of the season, has been battling some injuries. He showed up big time in a huge homecoming win for the Gales. 24 carries, 139 yards, and 3 scores. If the Gales can exhibit some balance on offense, take some of the pressure off of Nate Hobbs' shoulders, he's looked a little overwhelmed at times this season, that could be a big development for the Gales, who are one big game against the Ottawa GGs away from solidifying a playoff berth after a season that hasn't gone anywhere near the way that they hoped and thought it would.
Coming up, we'll check out Gord's lack of depth, and then we'll bring you X's and Olsen. Stick around.
Krown Countdown U is supported by the Guelph Griffins, the defending Yates Cup champions.
BCFC semifinal number 1. West Shore Rebels hosting the VI Raiders. 2:20 left in the game. Raiders running back Nathan Berg powers his way into the end zone for the TD. VI lead 28-26. The Raiders would add a Rouge to lead by 3. West Shore with 1:20 left puts a drive together which ends in a Jamel Lyles running TD from 2 yards out with 23 seconds left in the game. West Shore is moving on to the Cullen Cup. The Okanagan Sun will have an opportunity to defend their BCFC championship after squeaking out a 3-point win over the visiting Langley Rams at the Apple Bowl. So the Cullen Cup is set in BC. The upstart West Shore Rebels host the defending champion Okanagan Sun in Langford on southern Vancouver Island. PFC now, and there was an Edmonton upset in the CIS in one part of town, and over at Clark Park, the Edmonton Huskies would serve up another, surprising the Calgary Colts 55-35. With the loss, the Calgary Colts drop out of first place on the last week of the season. It also sets up a rematch in one semi with the Colts hosting the Huskies at McMahon Stadium this weekend. And the Saskatoon Hilltops will host the Regina Thunder at the Gordie Howe Bowl in Saskatoon. Over to Quebec and CEGEP Division 1. Lennoxville in first, owning the tiebreaker on Notre Dame de Foix in Cégep D1 as the teams roll into the final week of the regular season. Welcome back to the studio, everyone. Now it's time to sharpen up that light pen and get in touch with the coach, Coach Olson and X's and Olson.
This week, we're going to take a look at probably the most important area of the field, the red zone. We're going to take a look at the way offenses try to manipulate the use of formations to create opportunities to score touchdowns instead of field goals. Let's go to the first clip. One of the things about the red zone is there's a level of predictability from a defensive scheme standpoint. Offenses know that defenses are going to bring some pressure and most likely be caught in man coverage. You're going to take a look here at how the University of Regina Rams take advantage of that scheme. Here you go. You got the Rams inside the Huskies red zone. 10-yard line going in. 3 receiver is someone that's usually going to be locked up against the Sam linebacker. Quite often the worst cover guy in the secondary. Usually teams will try to play a safety over the top, but you'll see how Regina uses a smash concept to take advantage of that player. Here we go. Here you'll see the pressure from the outside. Let's pause it right here. You got a simple smash concept for those who haven't been coached up. Corner route from number 3, hitch from number 1, and right here's a nice little touch. You got an under from number 2. That gives the QB a read on coverage. He confirms it's man, and now we've got a leverage throw to the back pylon right here on the corner. Let's roll it forward and see the results. Beautiful timing here. Nice throw over the top. Got leverage on the safety, easy completion. This is what offensive teams are trying to do. Get mismatches with their best receiver versus a tough cover player and get leverage on defenders. Let's go to the next clip here. Here you go. You got UBC down in a similar area of the field running a 14 set. Not many teams run 14 sets. All that means is 4 to the boundary and to the field here where all the space is. You got 1 receiver to go one-on-one with that defensive back. Safety moves over to the boundary just where you want them, and now you exploit the matchup. Let's roll this clip forward and see what Travell Pinto does. You got O'Connor under center to maximize timing, 3-step drop, get the ball out there. Pinto almost gets in the end zone. Outstanding use of scheme and spacing to get the ball as close to the end zone as possible. Now let's go and take a look how the U of C does it in the same game. Here you got the U of C. You've got a nice little cluster or bunch formation. 3 receivers in a confined area of space. 1, 2, 3 defenders with a high defender in the middle of the field. This is exactly what the U of C wants. You've got these 2 guys on the same level. You're going to see a rub and pick type of scheme to be able to get the ball into space and create a touchdown. Let's roll the clip. This cluster concept works outstanding to the goal line. Let's freeze it right here. Right here, you've got that little pick concept for anyone coming to the outside. We've got a pressure here, which makes this play even better. And you got the inside guy in the bunch getting out to the flat with the corner concept over the top. Takes 2 defenders. Outstanding scheme, wide open receiver into the flat, easy touchdown. Let's roll it. Right there into the flat, turns around, no one in the vicinity, easy touchdown for Hartley. That's how you have to do it if you're going to be one of the top teams in the country. You got to make sure you score touchdowns in the red zone and not field goals.
Now it's time for Triple W 2K, or what we want to know. And we've got a Triple W 2K for the folks in Kingston, and this question was asked by Claude Skilly, who has been covering the Queen's Gales.
Golden Gales, Jim.
Since the last time they won the Grey Cup. Sorry about that, Claude. He was on fire on Twitter during homecoming, and he asked this simple question. Is the new Richardson Stadium where tradition goes to die? Now, Gord, I can't imagine you dressed in all yellow from head to toe, but you did play there, and you know a little bit about what goes on at Queen's and some of the traditions. There's students that are upset about this homecoming game. There are alumni who are upset about it. There's media. There's people in the community that just didn't even show up for this one. What are your thoughts?
Well, for starters, my first thought is that goal can actually be quite flattering at times, Jim. But this is the latest in a series of tone-deaf missteps by the Queen's Athletic Department. And this stadium opening this year has been an unmitigated disaster for the school. It all started with that national TV opening where they had thousands of empty seats on national television. They claimed the game was sold out, wasn't even close, and then it progressed to homecoming, which was a complete debacle. Queens has actively stomped on traditions in the most tradition-laced school in the entire country. You've got alumni who are upset about it, myself included, and I'm a proud alumnus of this school. I'm still wearing this tricolor pin 5 years after I graduated. You've got current students that are upset about it because now student tickets are limited. Used to be that there was an entire side of the stadium for the students. They could come and go as they please. And as a result, ask Justin, we had one of the rowdiest student sections in the country. No longer the case. It's usually half empty. Again this weekend, they announced a sellout. There were thousands of empty seats. Used to be an alumni parade at homecoming. Was the highlight of the game. We used to love it as students while we were there, looking at all these alumni walking around, their year proudly displayed, all wearing their old jackets, looking great. That's no longer the case. It's just a blanket salute to alumni. It used to be that the engineers would rush the field at halftime, one of the great traditions in Canadian college football. They'd slam their jackets in the middle of the field. The opposing team had to run off the field for the halftime break to get out of their way. The alumni loved it and would join them. That's no longer the case because they can't get anywhere near the field. The Queens band, still around, used to have their own cheerleading team. Used to be a huge part of the game day presentation. They've been gradually pushed aside and defunded, so they are no longer relevant. For a school that loves to talk about the past, loves to talk about history, loves to talk about tradition, the leadership at Queen's University is doing a piss-poor job of keeping that tradition alive and well.
Okay, you can cool off there. Justin, you got anything for us?
I'll leave that all the gourd. Man, it must be hot in that studio.
Triple W2K, can McGill make it 2-for-2 versus Concordia? And what does that mean for the two Montreal-based schools who are in a pitched recruiting battle? Gord.
Well, both of these schools have lost the tiebreaker versus Sherbrooke. Sherbrooke finishes up with Montreal and Laval, so Sherbrooke likely to finish at 3-5, but these two teams might be as well. And the problem for them is they need to get to 4-4, which for McGill makes this week's game an absolute must-win because who does McGill get next week? They get Montreal. So this game is massive for the Redmen. They took that game, but that was all the way back in week 1. Concordia was the team with the better outlook going into the season. They have come on a little bit as the season's progressed, but this has massive implications. McGill has a good chance to take it behind their freshman quarterback, but we'll see, and I will be watching this game closely as that battle, not entirely for Montreal, but for Anglophone Montreal, rages in Quebec.
Justin, Hilaire versus Donovan. This is a great battle, isn't it?
It is, and it's a big one, as you mentioned, Jim, for the recruiting ground, and I'll take McGill for two reasons. They seem to have gathered a little bit of momentum both in the offseason and this season. And as Gord mentioned, their freshman quarterback, Frederick Paquette-Perreault, coming off the best performance of his career. Yes, it was against Bishops, but still, 465 yards, 4 total touchdowns, makes the Redmen the favorite in this game.
So that was a contentious version of Krown Countdown U for another week. If you have complaints, you can complain anywhere on social media right now and right here. But for now, let's get out to the game.